Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the December 30th radio show. Hope everyone's doing well out there. I am going to be talking about a few things today and answering questions for the first half, and then in the second half we're going to bring on Gilbert, who's the head of our chapters, international chapters, and sort of overarching all the chapters in certain ways, assisting with Zeitgeist Day and many other things to talk about developments that are going on. The first issue I want to talk about is Zeitgeist Day in New York, which, as I announced before, was going to be a Venus Project symposium, which is still in the works. Unfortunately, the space we're utilizing has a severe technical issue, and they can no longer accommodate, which was a big bummer because it was a very unique space. I had designed the event to encapsulate the entire space. It was 3 floors, and due to this problem that they've had, I have to basically find another venue. So that's a bit of a setback for us in New York, but in the end, this is a global event day. One event isn't the most important, even though Jacques and Roxanne will be at whatever event we do. As of right now, I'm going to have to say that March 13th is the official day. I remember last radio show I denoted that it was more of a Zeitgeist weekend. Obviously, there's going to be flexibility here between the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, depending on who can do what where. Last year we had some events on other days that were surrounding our March 15th day, which is what it was then, which is fine, and we're going to have a website up soon to support all of this stuff. My programmer is working on that. But anyway, as far as the symposium is concerned, the details of that are in the works, and I'm going to have to get back to everybody about the specifics. Hopefully no one has made any event plans as far as coming to New York. I know I've gotten many, many emails of people interested in coming to New York. Please wait a little while longer while I figure out what exactly is going to happen because, unfortunately, these types of problems emerge. So that's the only real announcement I have, except for there's something that popped up on the forum I wanted to talk about, which basically has to do with money. And this is an old-time debunking notion that, okay, the Zeitgeist Movement, the Venus Project, they're just trying to sell things and make money. And I've avoided this issue because it's so juvenile, but I'm going to go ahead and explain very simply some key points to understand if you in the movement encounter people that seem to have this idea that why I'm on this radio show to make money and everybody's out here to make money. So let me just first point out my particular situation. The first point would be that, as everyone knows, I sell DVDs for $5 each. I want you to contrast this to people who make films and sell them for $15 to $20 a piece. Am I an unethical person for charging substantially less for DVDs that I've made at some extreme cost? People say, oh, Zeitgeist 1, that was made from a bunch of clips from other people's documentaries. Yes, it was. It was never intended to be a film at all. And I was put in a very difficult position of approaching all of those people that had that copyrighted footage and having to purchase that after the film was so popular. So you can do the math on how much that might have costed me. It was quite staggering. Now, $5 a DVD. Obviously, I make money off of that. That money goes right back into all the work that we do. I mean, I have to make some type of money. I think you would imagine. Everyone has to do that. That's the nature of the system. Also note that both films are on the Internet for free. Immediately we're put on the Internet for free. The addendum was posted the day after its Los Angeles premiere. I didn't have to do that. I could have sat back and, again, charged $20 a disc while no one could see it online, but I didn't because it's about spreading information. I also want to point out that anyone who has a DVD burner can download the full DVD torrents with all subtitles. I've always supported the torrent medium, and in fact, all of our media is available in this way. The addendum torrent, you can go right to the toolkit page on the movement site, and you guys can find this and along with all of our other media and download it for free. There's no cost at all to learn about the work that we're doing. Furthermore, since I'm on this note and since I'm rather tired of dealing with this issue, let me point out that I personally operate at a monthly deficit at this point, with more money going out than coming in. Now, I have other monetary games that I play, I moonlight with to make money in the commercial world to compensate for this, but at this time with my new film and Zeitgeist Day, I don't have time to moonlight because there's too much going on and too much focus that I have to maintain and continue the work that needs to be done to have the execution of all of these different projects that are going on, which have zero monetary aspect to them except for the new film when it comes out, which again will be available online for free, $5 DVD, free downloadable torrents. I'm not even going to. It's annoying to me how people seem to just poo-poo that as though there's no altruism in that. I just find that maddening. But again, it's juvenile, so I don't really take it that personally. Ultimately, in the end. So I also want to point out something else about me personally. I've done very well in New York as an accomplished film editor, animator, music composer in the advertising community. That's what I've done for years and years and years, as I've spoken about before, which of course I don't like. I could be right now sitting at a 9-to-5 job in an art director position, making 6 figures a year, living the bullshit American dream in the upper 10%. I don't, because meaning to life isn't about money and material comfort. You know, this isn't who I am, and I can see the world in a different way, so I behave accordingly based on my beliefs. And I really can't sit back with the information that I've learned from Jacques Fresco and everyone else about the state of affairs and just blindly look the other way. And that's what, unfortunately, everyone else does. I have no health insurance. I don't know if anyone knows that. I do what I do at a great deal of risk. So keep that in mind for any of the naysayers out there that are trying to find anything they can to put us down. As far as the T-shirts, there's another one that we get attacked for. Well, guess what? No one has to buy them. It's not information. There's zero monetary restriction on being able to learn about what we're doing. The typical educational scam is the idea that there's some book which has some wonderful empirical knowledge in it that you have to buy in order to learn about the world around you. We don't play that game. So, you know, I spent an outrageous amount of time on the 83-page movement guide, which I'm going to be updating soon at another extensive cost of time, and it will be available again for free download. So I'm saying this right now not to chastise anyone per se that has cynicisms, but to actually give this a documented notation. So when somebody comes up to you and says, oh, they're just trying to make money, and I'll get to the Venus Project in a second, you can say, give them this clip of audio of me describing the scenario as it exists, and really just the point of comparison to what all the other supposed activist and social movement organizations attempt to do. They base everything exclusively on the exchange of money for their materials, universally. The movement's not like that. As far as the Venus Project, it's a little bit different. They're in a very complex situation. Roxanne Meadows has personally supported that project for decades while letting Jacques do his work, his intellectual material and physical work, experimentations to support the direction, the information that's required to understand the technical feasibility of what we're talking about. As anyone knows, Jacques has spent his entire life studying all sorts of aspects of human behavior, of society as a whole. He's a brilliant generalist, and he had to be facilitated in that way, not having to worry about money. Roxanne provided this buffer, which is a truly honorable thing. I get very upset when people attack them. You know, since the collapse of the real estate market, which is what Roxanne worked in for years and years and years doing renderings, she'd do drawings and renderings in Venus, Florida, or around the area. The collapse of the real estate market has destroyed their work for a couple years now. And then when I first met them, she had no work. They had no work at all. If you wonder, you know, why they're selling their estate, it's because they have to pay out about $5,000 a month alone to support their research facility, which they really can't do anymore. So they do sell their stuff at commercial rates, and that is the only thing they can do. And anyone that supports the direction will attempt to support them. It's a 501c, by the way. So money that's donated to them in their donation accounts goes towards educational material specifically. They can't just pull out all money from their 501c and go to the beach. That's not how it works. They have to account for things. So I think I've belabored this enough, and I just want to get that out there because I'm starting to see this. Probably the only attack that we can really get at this stage is this idiotic monetary, they're in it for the gain attack. I'm not on this radio station for any monetary gain. In fact, I'm paying. I'm paying for many, many different things that I don't even talk about in order to keep things going. So anyway, I want to just get that out there because I'm getting really bored with this consistent, repetitive argument. Now, first question, which is a very important one. Someone sent this to me and they put it on the forum. Excuse me. It is a response, evidently, by Noam Chomsky to the Zeitgeist Movement. Someone asked him his opinion on the movement. He responded with an email. I'm going to read his response that was sent to me. Again, this is third party. If this isn't correct, then I'm sorry, but it does sound like his rhetoric. I have a feeling this is absolutely what his response was. I see no reason for the individual to lie about this that posted it. Noam Chomsky replies, quote, I don't regard the Zeitgeist Movement as an activist movement. Rather, it seems to me to be a very passive movement that is misled by doctrines that have a pleasant sound but collapse on analysis. Among them is the idea that we should, quote, stop supporting the system and should not, quote, fight it, that is, seek to change and overcome it. That means that we should withdraw into passivity. Nothing could be more welcome to those in power, says Chomsky. My feeling is that however sincere the leaders and participants may be, the movement is seriously misguided. It is not leading towards change, but is undermining it by encouraging passivity and withdrawal from engagement, and offering a false sense that some real alternative is being proposed, except in terms so abstract and divorced from reality as to be virtually meaningless. Unquote. I'm trying to think of where to begin with this. The first thing I would have to point out in regard to this passivity notion, and I wonder if Chomsky looked at the work of Martin Luther King when he engaged the Montgomery bus boycott, which was profoundly successful. Is that a passive thing to deal with when you would choose not to engage in the system? I would have to correct Chomsky on one angle, many angles, but the worst fear that the power structure has, the absolute worst, is the fear that people will stop playing their games, because that's what keeps them in power. If people do not support the economic structure, the structure has no bearings. It has no stilts to keep it up. The most critical thing that people can do is reject the established order. What is activism as well? He says we're not an activist movement. What is activism? Is activism protesting in the streets? The Iraq War had some of the largest global protests in history. Did it really do anything to stop the United States? The U.S. is still there with their permanent military bases. No. Did the massive protests of Vietnam really change the outcome? I don't think so. The war was exhausted to the bitter end. I'm sure public opinion has bearing, but the powers that be have done very well to facilitate the ability to block off these groups. Now we have free speech zones. They've gotten very good at it. Honestly, the protest movement and traditional activism, as we've seen historically, I guess the 1960s would be sort of a staple of activism in America as far as what had been done, this supposed revolution that never really took hold. Everyone fell back into the same materialistic patterns. It doesn't seem to do much. So I would have to get more definition on his contexts. And by the way, I have a great deal of respect for Chomsky, for he has opened up a lot of minds about foreign policy, brilliant work in linguistics and the like, but I'm going to have to outright say that the ignorance of his statement here is absolutely depressing. The issue with activism as it exists today and as it exists in the works of Chomsky is that they don't understand what the goal even is. The only possible goal to sustainability and peace for all the world's people, which I hope is invariably the end goal in general, is finding a measure to actually facilitate sustainability. The only way to reduce this is to eliminate resource conflicts, which is exactly what the movement is about. In turn, the price and market system has to go. This is something I don't hear anybody talking about in the activist community because they don't understand that that's really one of the major sources of the problem. The market system, as we know it, is the largest destroyer of the environment and human perspective than anything you could ever imagine. Does Chomsky want to get rid of money? Has he ever even talked about monetary policy in literal terms of what it creates psychologically? Does he have a clue about the way the world operates in the sense of the deliberate preservation of scarcity through monetary control for individual corporations and governments to maintain power and geopolitical control, such as the obvious hegemonic surge of the United States to dominate a very scarce resource known as oil across the world? Does he understand what the end goal is when we run out of oil and we're on the verge of a financial collapse and a total resource collapse, which, by the way, these collapses will make 90% of the political and intellectual stuff he talks about utterly obsolete? Is he aware of any of this? Now, I'll admit that due to the very radical nature of our intents that our path is a bit undefined because there are many, many variables to consider. We need more numbers. However, we see a goal that no one else has had the courage to put forward because it's far too radical. Old school activists like Chomsky have no goal. They have no solutions whatsoever. And his dismissal of us, back to this statement, without even reviewing the core foundation of our ideas, which is a world based on resource management and a systems approach, creating a value system where people will learn that we have to share the resources and conserve them and apply them in a diligent, scientific manner. Otherwise, we're going to destroy ourselves. This is the only way to gain sustainability and, quote, peace. It's unacceptable that his dismissal of us, and I find that to be just really disheartening, considering how much respect. I wonder why this person gets so much acclaim, frankly, at this point in time. It's very archaic. Like nearly everyone else who bitches and complains about our system to sell their books, expose certain truths, and all sorts of various intellectual discourse that they think has meaning. Again, no solutions are offered whatsoever by these particular individuals, and I'm going to leave it at that. Question two, excuse me. Hi, Peter. I'm interested in promoting sustainable agriculture. In January, I'm starting a large-scale project in aquaponics to see how much I can grow using the best sustainable techniques available to date. Excuse me. How can I tailor this project or future endeavors in this area to the goals of the Zeitgeist Movement and the and the Venus Project? Well, I think any interest in sustainable agriculture has an obvious place because the research alone is going to create new information, new tactics and techniques that can aid everyone eventually. Being proactive on organic, sustainable agriculture is one of the most important things we could possibly have, considering the nature of the world today, with the erosion of the topsoil, with the absolute destruction of the topsoil as well, by all the chemicals that we've done with the monocultures. With the, we got Iowa, and they're just destroying the land with all of these natural gas fertilizers. The land is basically dead. We're going to have to move into alternative means, aquaponics, hydroponics. There's a lot of things that need to be reviewed very, very carefully to begin to transition out of our current patterns. So I think what you're doing to tailor your project, I'm not sure how to say more specifically about that, but what you're doing is brilliant, and I think everyone should be focusing on areas of creative and technical interest that does serve a social role, that does look to larger social concern. Obviously, as I've said a million times before, we live in a world of self-serving, monetary-based occupations that don't do anything for social interest. They have no social interest. You could bulldoze Wall Street right now, and it wouldn't do anything to change the world at its fabric level, at its fundamental level. It would, of course, be dire because of all the nonsensical investment schemes and floating currencies and all the nonsense that has no relationship to resources and reality. But anyway, I think I've made that point very clear. So keep going with that and just document your research and do what you can. And eventually, everyone who's really promoting social interests will come together, and we can utilize everyone's ideas and share ideas about how to make the most efficient society we possibly can, which is really the goal, which is not just an idealized goal, it's something that has to be done. I'll reiterate that again. With the exponential growth in population, we're looking at a massive bell curve that might tip. And as far as I'm concerned, you don't need a conspiracy for depopulation to deal with this problem because it's going to happen on its own weight. It's insane what is happening in the world with the absolute abuse of resources. So, you're going to have to realize that we have to change the system if we're going to support all the people that are on the planet. There's no way you're going to be able to support everyone with our current methods. Hold on one moment. Okay, number 3. Peter, what is your view concerning Hugo Chavez and the proposition of getting him to join the movement? I'm afraid he could be mistaken as the leader of the movement. He might do whatever he wants, undermine our actual goals, or discredit us. And since the movement is anti-military, anti-ruling class, it seems like a contradictory proposition and antithetical to grassroots activism. Well, first of all, I think that's a pretty dramatic declaration of Mr. Chavez. Like all leaders that exist today, they have to go through and do unethical things. That is the only way they can possibly get into positions of power. Chavez, I think, has done a lot of tremendously good things. I think there are also suspect things, but I don't know enough about the politics of Venezuela to be able to put that into perspective. I think he's much more concerned with the people than many, many other leaders are, and I have a great deal of respect for him on that level. He certainly is a very good critic of United States policy, and I believe his general social interests are for the well-being of his country. As far as his involvement, well, you have to understand what a radical combination that would be. remember what we're trying to do in the removal of the political structure into a structure that actually works. Remember what we're trying to do holistically with all the material that we put out. To say Chavez would just immediately agree to all that, I think, is very unrealistic. The approach that I would have to a leader like Chavez is say, look, we have sustainable ideas that we think that your country would benefit from, and then start them on the path of an absolute sustainable city where they don't have to worry about imports, to get them self-contained. And then hopefully the efficiency would rise and the use of their resources would come to a point where they wouldn't need money. Chavez or some leader could say, you know what, we're just going to allocate resources. We're not going to worry about budgets anymore. And I think that's a brilliant hope. I think that's a hope that we can see maybe happening when a country wants to move forward with true change, where they say, you know what, we're just going to go with the resources. And we're going to use what we have, not think about it in terms of trade and money. That is really the foundation of the Venus Project and the Zeitgeist Movement. We want to have respect for the actual resources and not money. Chavez is stuck in a political paradigm that might not lend to that anytime soon. I would be happy to get Jacques to meet with Chavez. I think that there would be great commonalities and parallel values, perhaps, but he's still stuck in a world of money and resource management through trade and all of the general detriments we deal with. So I have to keep that up in the air. I don't, your other assumptions in this question, I think, are a little misguided. You have to be a little more open to stuff like that and realize the position that these people are in. Number 5. Hi, Peter. How did you find out about the Venus Project? After my first film was released, I befriended William Gazecki. Actually, he sent me an email, and we became friends, and basically he made a film about Jacques that I'd never heard of the Venus Project. He sent me a film, and I watched it, and I was very impressed. I didn't really realize much about the social design as much as Jacques being a very unique person. Future by Design isn't really about the social design at all. It's more about Jacques and his general inventions and his way of thinking. But after I saw that, I sent William a praising email. He forwarded it to Roxanne. Roxanne emailed me, invited me to come out. I said, well, I think I want to interview Jacques, and I brought a camera, not really knowing what to expect. Actually, they sent me their book. That's what it was, and I was extremely impressed by the book because it really clearly clarified a direction that absolutely made sense. At that point, I really wasn't even aware of Jacques' social interests, as I mentioned before. Then I interviewed them, and then I just realized how important this information was, and it was a very dramatic learning experience. It shifted my perspective greatly as far as how I view things. So that's basically it. Number 6, aside from simply educating people about the Zeitgeist Movement and the Venus Project, do we have an ultimate plan? People are generally willing to listen, but the problem is that everyone is still scared to challenge the government. In other words, we can destroy people's faith and trust in government, but we ultimately need to destroy their fear of government as well. Is there any plan to create the initial spark that will light the fuse to some sort of, quote, revolution? I hope you have time to answer this question. Well, let's see here. The ultimate plan, as much as I've said this over and over again, is education. If you really think about what I mean by this, it's not just education in an arbitrary sense. If someone's educated to understand this, then hopefully they will support it. I think that's the definition of education in a lot of ways. You can be told information that you don't like. That isn't necessarily education, I think, by definition, but you can leave that for a semantic argument. If someone's educated on the importance of what we're doing, then their behavior is going to slowly shift. This is just the very nature of consciousness. There's even subconscious things will come out when people know something that they're not supposed to know, or they're doing something they're not supposed to do. There's a subconscious aspect that comes out. It slowly starts to guide people, especially when they know things are right. So I believe that education is still the most critical thing because it is also the most scarce issue right now. No one has any focus. Go back to that Chomsky quote. Think about how many millions of people listen to Chomsky, again, who's very brilliant in certain areas, but he fails miserably in other areas because he doesn't know the solution. No one does out there. The political construct is absolutely absent of this simple understanding that we have to begin to orient ourselves with resource management. If the public begins to understand this, then frankly, the only way they're really going to understand it is when things fail, which fortunately and unfortunately is right around the corner and is happening right now. So the ultimate goal is going to unfold, I think, in its own life. I have many ideas as far as activism and as far as things to put pressure on the system, but I don't have the numbers to move forward with it now. We have to create a holographic system of semi-interdependent groups that share the same goal and values, that understand the direction, that are doing what they can to educate everyone in the world about the importance of the model that we're talking about. And until that happens, there's really nothing else that can be done. We can do symposiums, we can do event days, we can do extended question and answers. I have the Zeitgeist Media project coming. I'm going to do this project From Earth to Venus, which we've already talked about. It's all a matter of getting people engaged in this very, very important social realization, and I really can't belabor that enough. And unfortunately, that's not enough for some people. They think that you have to jump into the streets. Physical protest does nothing in abstraction. It's only going to take mass numbers to change the system as far as I'm concerned, or a failure of a system so catastrophic that the leaders themselves come around and they take it upon themselves to move forward as a small group guiding the public, which is still ignorant. Those are two possible directions, and I'm not quite sure which is going to happen. One thing I do know is that something's going to happen, and it's going to be very cataclysmic. Either it's going to be in a positive direction, or it's going to be in a very, very, very negative direction. Number 7. Hello, Peter. To your knowledge, if we are able to build the first city with the technology of today, if possible, and have it operational, how much of the jobs, services would be automated, and what field of work would you see the majority of citizens should or would engage in? Hold on. You stated in an earlier address that the citizens of the first city would most likely be people who have technical skills to further the system and technology that the city is founded on. How skilled does a citizen have to be in the field to be able to meet the, for lack of a better word, standards in the first city? Okay, there's a little confusion here. The first city is a research facility. It's not a city where people live. So people that work in the first city are scientists that engage in everything that's relevant to it. And I can't go on a massive list of all the things that will be relevant to the city. I think I've done this before. Obviously, we have all the general facets of social architecture required to keep things going. Agriculture, food production, automated, of course. The focus is on automation, efficiency, sustainability, and everything is streamlined as technically possible. The skill sets would come from robotics, city planning, engineering, molecular engineering in the future for absolute sure. As far as the larger society issue, which I think is the more pertinent question, people will move away from the drudgery of repetitive labor. Basically, everything that you see that's repetitive, from people waiting tables, to people driving cabs, to people fixing airplanes in the same manner, to mechanics, all of that can eventually be automated. It's only the extremely complex, highly changeable occupations that we have to find more apt solutions for, which will come in time. As of right now, I think we can remove probably 80% of all mechanical labor through deliberate automation. And people at that stage will go into research. That's really where the human mind should be anyway. It shouldn't be in plowing fields and elevator men as used to exist. It should be in thinking and using their brains and eventually interacting with a database system, as we've described before, which can help assist. Wolfram Alpha is a good example of a primitive form of this that's come into fruition. There's a lot of things that people can do, but basically it comes down to research and thinking. It'll also have tremendous outgrowth of creativity and all sorts of social paradigm shifts that we can't even imagine today as far as the way people choose to interact with each other. It will be an entirely new culture. I'm a little bit of a tangent there. As far as the first city, this will be technicians that have a very deliberate role, as I've described before. Robotics, engineering, systems planning, electricians, everything that would relate in a technical construct. I think just about all fields eventually would come into play that relate to science, at least in the applied sciences. So I hope that answers your question. Number 8. You stated in an earlier address that page turn. Number 8. Hello, Peter. I think there is too little emphasis on what makes people happy. Machines can bring us a great deal, but have very little capability of bringing true happiness to people. And what makes people happy is this: nature and interaction with it, creating stuff and sharing it with others. These are basic happiness makers. So my question for you is today, what makes people happy? I know you've already answered it, but let's hear your take on it. Excuse me, I know I've already answered it, but let's hear your take on it. Well, you have to remember that happiness is essentially defined by culture. Some people were perfectly happy in the ancient Aztec civilizations where they stacked people up and ripped their hearts out and showed them to a big audience. Happiness is absolutely culturally defined. I think the closest empirical would be good health. Most people, if they're really sick, are not very happy. That would be general enough. So the first step to make people happy is to give them good health and then to reduce them from things they don't want to do, such as monotonous labor and drudgery. Machines help a great deal, as you state, but you also state that there's very little capability of bringing happiness to people. Well, I think you should go home and remove the washing machine, dishwasher, remove your refrigerator, remove every piece of technology, remove your stereo, remove all lighters, matches, remove your heating system, and sit in a box and actually just remove your walls, because a house is essentially a technical construct. And think about where your happiness might lie. It's a relative concept, of course. And I want to bring up a point regarding psychosocial stress that I made in the Where Are We Going lecture, where I talk about the economic stratification of America and across the world, and how due to economic stratification, by example, in America, we're seeing continually more crime, a continual rise in prison populations. You'll notice, and I had this my experience myself, if you talk to poor people that don't have much exposure to the external world, they're limited from the internet, they're limited from television, they can be very, very happy living on very, very little. They have their daily routine, they've adapted, they don't know anything else, and they're happy. So unfortunately, we live in a world of communication, and if this is a paradoxical idea. I don't know the answer. Which is more happy? Is it minimalism, or is it advancement and materialism? Materialism is obviously a contrivance. When I talk about the Venus Project, I say it's an advanced form of minimalism. It's a high-tech minimalism, because as I've said before, you're not going to be able to support the world's population with the current methods we see now. We have to move into a, quote, high-tech scenario with absolute conservation, an absolute application of known methods with science and technology. That is what has created our population through the advancement of energy and new technologies, and I'm afraid this pattern has already been constructed, and that's what's going to carry us through. So back to your question, happiness is a cultural phenomenon. I believe if you reduce the problems that people think about in life, reduce the drudgery of their lives, the difficult, strenuous, backbreaking labor that we've slowly been able to pull out of, they will be a little bit more happy. There's a lot of things you could say on that. I mean, what makes people happy? The culture, and the way the culture rewards their reflection. Number 9. Hello, Peter. You did not really answer or seem to understand my question about a gift economy versus resource-based economy last time. You tried to answer this on December 23rd. You were saying that if people in a resource-based economy want to produce something such as painting or vegetables, they can't trade it. They have to give it away. Yes, exactly. This is what a gift economy is, isn't it? Giving away stuff. And this has to coexist together with the resource-based economy. Oh, you know what? I apologize if I misunderstood that. When I think of a gift economy, I automatically think back to a barter economy. So if I answered that question incorrectly, I apologize. I wouldn't even call it a gift economy anymore. It's a resource-based economy. And if people do create things that they want to share, well, then they can give it away or they can put it on display. They can just share it. It's not necessarily a gift in the sense that one person gives something to another. I would hope that things would become even more circular in that sense, and you wouldn't even need the term gift economy at all. I guess that would be my ultimate point, but I apologize if I answered that incorrectly. Number 10, I was presenting the ideas of the movement to some students in my class. There was one girl who volunteers to help the fire department, and I asked her what she thought of the idea of removing monetaryism from the society and making things last longer. She said if people were smart, they would design things to break down because it makes jobs available and so that people can help one another more often. What are your thoughts and arguments you would use to denounce this? I don't think I have to do too much to denounce that. Obviously, we live in a finite world at this stage in the sense that it's utterly irresponsible to just want to make things to break down, as we're doing now, but to do it deliberately just so people have labor in order to preserve the failing labor system. It's completely against any form of sustainable notion. We can't do that. We have to make things to last. We have to make systems that are designed for the longest term possible. That's the definition of sustainability. If we did something like what the student suggested, you would have heaps and heaps of garbage. It would be like the movie Idiocracy, where the guy wakes up and there's millions of tons of garbage 500 years later because the public became so ignorant they had no idea what to even do with garbage. So there's your refutation. Number 11, if hypothetically starting tomorrow the Venus Project resources and ideas were implemented worldwide, with the exception of getting the masses to be in full support, how would we explain everything to them, assuming that we have just begun redesigning and rebuilding entire cities? I'm not quite sure what you mean. I don't think we can do that, is my point. To build a research facility that exists in sort of a, an exploratory theme park, if you will, to show what the it's almost like a science theme park where people can see what the future could be. That's really what Jacques talks about with his initial city research facility. There's more aspects to it than that as far as doing literal research, sort of like what the Venus Project's estate in Florida is intended to do, which is really what it is. That's a microcosm, even though it's not set up in any type of high-tech way. You really couldn't hypothetically just start tomorrow and assume that, and start building the cities and think that people are going to understand it. That's why we have to engage in what I call social therapy and this intense educational necessity for people to understand their relationship to the world and to get rid of the idiotic ideologies that have no basis. And on that note, I'm going to just simply say that one of the reasons I talk against things like religion, and I talk against things like, old social establishments, if I was to make a list of aspects that are detached from reality when it comes to resource management and social organization, you can take all the Judeo-Islamic Christian religions, Hinduism. Hinduism has hints of balance, though, in its earlier texts, and so do all of religions, but they're not really related to the planet. And then you could take communism, socialism, fascism, and all the other ancient ideologies. These ideologies have zero basis to the natural world. That's how you refute these notions, by the way. Someone says, oh, well, this is communism. You say, no, it's not communism, because communism, in any of the writings, was all about people and relationships of one group to another. It had nothing to do with the resources of the planet. There's only three things that the world operates on. It's energy, which has to be conserved and diligently assessed in the most high-tech way possible to maintain sustainability. I hope eventually we'll achieve almost infinite energy with the use of advanced technologies that are unfortunately not even remotely being explored right now. But there's energy, then there's material resources, there's the copper and the iron ore and all the things that comprise everything that we create around us to help create tools. And then there's human ingenuity and technology and the scientific method. These three attributes is all there is. Is this a religion? No. This is the only thing that has worked itself out in patterns over time that we can with any confidence say, yes, these things work to support us, to let us survive as a species and maintain a quality standard of living. That's it. You don't have to even engage the argument of former social systems. When I hear people like G. Edward Griffin say that what we're talking about is pure Marxism, I immediately know that he has no idea what he's talking about in relationship to the core of what our understandings are, which isn't about human relationships exactly. It's about the survival of the species. And as everyone is going to find out very soon, either we move in this direction or we perish. It's either you learn to respect the planet, and this isn't some new age idea or idiotic Alex Jonesian notions where he thinks that any other idea counter to capitalism and counter to Christianity somehow has its own religious basis. There's nothing religious or idealistic about what we're talking about. I'm against ideologies. I'll put it that frank. I don't give a shit about philosophy. Either it works or it doesn't. And the only way you know if it works is what history has supported. And if you break down the foundation of society, again, it's only energy, resource management, and human ingenuity through scientific application. That's it. So if any of you have those problems with dealing with these continual arguments, please bring up those aspects, and it will shut them right up, because none of the former individuals that have advocated any religious or social structure have ever really taken these things into account, because they didn't even think about it. Where was I? Number 12. How will artists get credit for their ideas? And hold on. How will artists get credit for their ideas and feel like they did something. Some judge that by the amount of money a painting gets, it creates value. If I came up with a great idea, I would not want someone else to take credit for it. I'm willing to let others use the idea, but if people don't get credit for what they think of, then I see that as a problem. I think where you're coming from is really an issue of values that is very outdated. First of all, let's think about it tangibly. No one really creates or invents anything. There are staples of extreme intellectual capacity that build upon knowledge that's been created beforehand, such as the path from Isaac Newton to Albert Einstein, with all sorts of scientists in between that were doing all sorts of brilliant things in mathematics that each one of these artists, I think, scientists, artists built up on, and they simply are working at the next level. Now we have all sorts of complex theoretical notions of quantum mechanics, of string theory, which are building upon even more science of the work of Einstein, and eventually going to be making them look like just like we look at Newton today, in the sense that Newton is considered very simple in his notions, even though he's of course very brilliant. But the fact is that Einstein, was like really profound when he came out. We're going to have a whole new levels of science and invention that come out that will make Einstein look very conservative, for lack of a better expression. I'm not expressing this very well. In other words, it's a big chain of causality. No one really invents or discovers anything. It is simply ego, where people think that they deserve credit for what they've done. No one is novel in the sense that they can, out of nowhere on a blank sheet of paper with no prior influence, invent something or create anything. Music, which I'm very interested in, when people compose music, all they're doing is taking their ideas of everything that they've been exposed to and shuffling them around in unique ways. In fact, that's how Jacques defines art. An artist takes creativity, I think his definition is creativity, is taking known things and arranging them in original, unique ways that have not been done before. And as a musician, I can go back and listen to modern composers and hear all their influences. It's fairly easy if you train your ear. You can hear their influences of the Baroque period. You can hear their influences of other modern composers. All scientists work the exact same way. So the notion of credit, I think, will eventually become a very childish notion. Someone else won't take the credit for something. It's a collective creation. Society itself is creating everything, and there's really no other logic to it. This is also a monetary issue. People get monetary reward, so they think that it's their credit once they get the money. Therefore, they think even without money they deserve credit. I'm not sure which came first, frankly, the ego or the monetary reward, but they're certainly intertwined. So in the future, people will transcend these childish notions. Jacques is not the originator of every single one of his ideas. He is a composite, and he will admit this to you just as I am. We are running composites of our life experience and education. We do have certain novelties based on our mental alignments as far as the neurological constructs. For example, a savant. If you see a savant who has huge concentrations of neurons in certain areas that enable certain algorithmic functions to happen extremely rapidly where they don't even understand what they're doing, they couldn't even describe it to you. Are they just magically this way? No. They still have to learn things in order to become that. In other words, they don't have to learn how to process it. That's innate. But they still have to have the information to be processed. So these math geniuses and memory geniuses, they're only original in the extremity of their appearance, not in their creation. I hope that makes sense. Number 13. I have been fussing about this for a while. Oh, I'm sorry. This is a continuation of the same question. Number 14 was on a different page. Number 14, chicken or the egg? Do we wait for society to change before we start seriously building the first city, or do we build the first city as a way to help society change? I'm going to stop you right there. Again, I think there's some people out there that aren't understanding what the first city is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a research facility. And building the first city in a monetary system would require private funds. We build a research facility that the world can see. At the same time, we have to engage, again, education and social therapy to get the public to understand how the world actually works in its utterly simplified way, as I exemplified before with the 3 bullet points of energy, material resources, and human ingenuity through the scientific method. until people understand these fundamental things, you could build the biggest, most elaborate city, and they're just going to be like apes in a lab running around in circles, not having any idea how to function because they're not educated, and their values are going to still be distorted and based on the self-interest greed systems that we see today. I'm at 15 minutes before I bring Gilbert on. I'm going to start moving more quickly. Number 15, are you aware of the scientists that say nature versus nurture, the nature versus nurture debate is nonsense, and that it is a combination of both working together? I'm guessing you are. One that caught my eye was Matt Ridley. I'm not sure who that is, who wrote Nature via Nurture, which he claims he is unbiased towards either, and he is going to prove that both nature relies on nurture and vice versa. But early on I could tell that he was biased towards nature because he would spend far longer trying to debunk nurture than nature. I'm going to go ahead and stop you there because it's kind of a long post. There are many aggressive schools of thought on this. On one side you have people like Steven Pinker, who are very, very aggressive on their support of the genetic basis of behavior. On the other side you have, I think, more balanced individuals, such as you know, you can already gauge my bias, such as Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who is a true anthropologist who has taken a tremendous amount of time to study human and non-human primates, who gravitates towards the nurture argument. Human beings are exceedingly malleable. While there are predispositions, and by the way, you're absolutely right, there is no separation. It's more of a catchphrase, the nature versus nurture. It's an age-old thing that people use to talk about the subject. Obviously, they're completely intertwined. We know that the environment starts in the womb. There are dramatic things that can happen to a child that carry on their entire life. The environment also begins in epigenetic ways. If you look into this information, cells can be changed by the environment. Genetics can be changed by the environment. If you really think about it, obviously, there's a core environmental influence on everything. And the genetic element is just a set of tools and propensities that can only materialize or not based on environmental triggers. And this is, I made a lot of points on this in the lecture I did in London, Where Are We Now? At the very end, I cover feral children, and I cover a lot of research on different things regarding this. One classic example, which was annotated by some scientists, was a very famous one, was where they took a mouse, and it was one of these first experiments where they had never really done this before, and they punched out one of its genes where it had to do with cognitive function and memory and sensory systems such as smell. And they punched out this gene, and they brought it up, and they found that it was basically, for lack of a better expression, intellectually dim. It had a certain form of retardation. And they were like, wow, okay, this proves the genetic basis of behavior and intellect and intelligence. We've done it. We can see where these things are. And then this got lots of publicity, and it was I wish I had the name of the report. But what they did afterwards got very little publicity. And this was supporting the nature argument. But what they did is they took this mouse and they ran it through a bunch of environmentally stimulating environment, where it would learn and it would go through wheels and it would put through different tests for cognitive function, and it was basically re-educated, if you will, to regain virtually everything that was lost when they punched out that gene, which means that, for lack of a better expression, certain synaptical connections were created through this educational process, which has been known. So I believe that in this argument, you really can't just degrade the nurture aspect. Every word coming out of my mouth has been taught to me. Every concept realized is a formulation put into my mind through my sense of reasoning, which comes out with other solutions. It's an input. It is a perpetual input. So I find it very difficult to deal with people that are hell-bent on, say, the twin studies, which I think are absolutely asinine. They say, oh, these twins, some twins have they wear rubber bands around their left hand, or they flush the toilet before they go to the bathroom. What is that? These are cultural issues, for one. They had to learn to put the rubber band around their wrist, for one. Even if it was true that these, I'd say, virtually idiotic notions don't mean anything, but even if it was true that they had these weird neurotic similarities, they're still learned behaviors. So anyway, I hope that helps address that. And anyone who wants to know my perspective and my education on the issue, please watch the London lecture. At the very end, I go through a lot of information on that, and I will be going into more with the new film, too. Number 16. Hi, Peter. People seem as they must have an ism. Let me rephrase this. Hi, Peter. People seem to want an ism label for this movement. Do you think it might be a good idea to give it a brand ism label of our own, perhaps even having a wiki definition for it? I'm going to stop right there. No. Flat terminology is always subject to criticism, and the semantic thing becomes distorted. I'd rather have our meaning, so to speak, defined by the information we relay, not some arbitrary ism which is always going to be used as an offensive attack. Say, oh, well, you're just a technocrat, or again, the communist, and of course we have the terrorist, which is an open-ended concept used for anybody essentially that wants to oppose the state. No, I'm against isms, I'm afraid. Number 17. Hello, Peter. Many debunkers and naysayers. Actually, wait a minute. I already did that one. That's what I talked about at the beginning. Number 18. Do you think something needs to be done beyond introducing people into the movement's thought? For example, some people start a test city. Okay, these are the continual questions that come up over and over again about the city. I already answered that one. Number 19. Hello, Peter. I've been into the movement ever since the second movie came out, and I've always wanted to do my part. I'm 17, still in high school, and I'm having a difficult time in getting the other kids interested in the movement. Any thoughts on how to do this? I will be going to Washington, D.C. for a week in the spring with a National Youth Leadership Forum, meeting with politicians. I want to try to spread the word there. Well, I believe the youth, engaging youth is difficult because they are in a fragile state. It's very good, actually. But they're in a fragile state, and they're often susceptible to a lot of influence from their parents and the first awarenesses of politics. What we're doing, again, is relatively radical. It's going to take a unique initial value system for someone at a young age to really grab hold of it. But then again, I think the vulnerability of children at a young age is ideal, too, because what we're talking about is extremely simple. As far as getting other kids interested in the movement, just try to keep it in simplified terms. Try to describe what I described earlier, and that's the fact that there's energy, resources, and the scientific method through human ingenuity. That's all there is. If you can break things down in a simplified manner so they can get rid of their biases, and it's very easy to provide examples for this, and as I've said before, we're going to be looking at some very interesting times as this sort of peak everything begins to materialize. The system is going to show its hand, and you're not going to have to do much defending of the problems of the system. You simply have to take the problems and address each aspect of those problems and show how the Venus Project and the resource-based economy proposes direct solutions. And that's the best way I can describe it to you without going on too many tangents. Basically, you need to educate yourself and become versed in the way I am. And again, it doesn't take that much time because you're going to get the same questions over and over again. Again, people are going to call you some kind of name that has a relationship to a political party. You'll be a leftist, liberal, communist, collectivist. These are just typical things that you have to deal with, and you just have to stop them in their tracks and explain the reasoning behind it. Because once the reasoning is presented, there's no one I can find that can refute it. The only refutation that sits in the middle of the air is the human nature argument, which is easily debunkable if you take enough time to do it. They say, well, we can't do that, even though it makes sense, because it's against the human's nature to basically cooperate in a larger scale. And that is nonsense. So I hope that helps. I do your best. And also you have to gauge the person you're dealing with. I've said this before on numerous radio shows. You have to kind of feel them out. If you're dealing with someone who's heavy into religion, you say, well, Christ said a lot of things about reciprocation, about, feeding everyone around you, taking someone into your home, and you taking the floor while they take the bed. There was all of these notions that have never been put into practice. So you have to find their parallel value. And we all share parallel values at some level. In fact, I would say that the survival of the species and what's contingent upon it should be the values of human society as a whole, not in the form of a religion or an ideology, but an absolute fact that you need food, air, and water and energy to conduct your operations. And in the modern day, you have to have sustainable practices, conservation methods, and everything that we talk about in order to proceed. There's no debate with that. There's no ism to derail that. It's not humanism. It's not environmentalism. I don't even know of a word for it. Yeah, I don't really care to find one. So we have 5 minutes before Gilbert comes on. Let me keep going. Number 21. What if we suddenly removed the current elite? Would they be replaced? Hold on a second. Is this a continuation? Oh, there we go. Hi, Peter. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you have mentioned on your radio shows that you think that these population reduction conspiracy theories are ridiculous. Also, that if we suddenly remove the current elite, they would be replaced, yes, which this I agree with you. However, I also feel like the current elite realize the same thing as Jacques with regards to technology being able to replace most of the workforce. In other words, most of the elite's slave force is no longer needed. If most of the slave force is no longer needed by the slave masters, what are they going to do with us? I would like to know why you pay no merit to the fact that there may be some truth to these population reduction conspiracy theories. I suspect that the elite would be concerned that someone or some movement, such as the Zeitgeist Movement, would permanently remove the elite and it's their system and its system of control and power forever, and that they might take preventative steps to stop us. I have no doubt that preventative steps will emerge in time, but I believe that our protection comes from the fact that we are working to have groups without nationalistic origin all over the world that are interested in this direction. So if one group gets persecuted, persecutors have to deal with the fact that there are groups all over the world that feel the same way. And that is the protection, if you will, because I'm hoping that it will become large enough and the media will be recognized enough as a true force, social force, that isn't just some whim, that if someone was persecuted in some country, the news would go crazy with other groups that respond to that persecution. That is a general form of defense. It's defense in numbers, and I've talked about that before. As far as the elite population reduction, I don't deny that there is on an agenda somewhere along the line of people that see the need to reduce population, people maybe like Henry Kissinger that have made weird comments like this in the past. It does not surprise me, but I'm talking about the fringe, lunatic paranoia of certain radio talk show hosts and people that sell DVDs on population reduction, the New World Order, to make money at the expense of the fear of the population. These are the things that I find aggravating and annoying, and I really think they do more damage than anything. This type of paranoia has no basis. I can guarantee you that the establishment at large doesn't need to engage in depopulation in and of themselves if they want to see it occur, because the system itself, as it exists right now, is going to make it happen. So all they have to do is keep doing what they're doing, and everything will look natural, everything will look out of control. It's change that is the fear. It's not some action on the part of the establishment. It's the fact that they don't want to disrupt their establishment, and that's what we are trying to do. We have to do it if we intend to survive and not see a total breakdown. I think a breakdown will be in order regardless, because unfortunately the majority of the population is ignorant, and they don't understand, and they have to have this biosocial pressure to get them into a frame of mind that wants to move forward. You have to pull the rug out from under them for them to realize that, yes, we have to do something different, but it's going to happen on its own accord. It's a natural process of social entropy, if you will. So, and as far as your notion on the slave worker force, that's conspiratorial. I don't want to go into details on these rather nonsensical, idealized concepts that, there's an overarching elite and they're just going to use machines for everything, get rid of the population, then they'll be happy in their, quote, New World Order, as is discussed by all these idiots out there that just bore me to death. Not only does it bore me that they talk about that, but guess what? None of them, even if they believed it, they do nothing to create any type of real solution. The real solution will come to this type of problem of population and support from a new social design that actually works. And that is, of course, the greatest threat and the most radical thing that you can do. So even if everything you said was true, what we're doing will remove that propensity in time. So I hope that answers your question. And I'm going to go to Gilbert now, which I believe is there. Let me find out, actually. I don't think he's there yet, actually. So let me go on. Number 22. This is more, actually that's a big one. Let me find one that's a little bit shorter since I think he'll be popping up here any second. Let's see. Okay, number 22. When spreading the word of a resource-based economy, I find that many people are far too set in their ways to objectively view the ideas presented by the movement. Would you agree that we need to focus our efforts on the university circuit and younger generations that have not yet felt the full clutches of the monetary system? Who do you think our most receptive audiences would be? Well, I think I addressed this a little bit as far as the youth, and I totally agree. University circuit would be wonderful. The real issue comes down to how to orchestrate that and getting people that really understand this direction besides myself or Jacques to be able to confidently go up, talk about it, answer difficult questions, as I constantly do, as you know, if anyone's ever listened to this radio show beyond this point. So I think, yes, focusing on this approach with younger audiences is ideal. In fact, I'd love to make, when the Zeitgeist Media Project launches, I'd love to have, say, a project that's entirely dedicated towards children, in the sense that we could use gestural things that are similar to what's happening now with cartoon books, nothing so asinine as, Disney or anything like that, but simple walkthroughs of relationship to the planet, resources, simple things that people can relate to. Oh, hold on one second. Let's see here. Sorry, everybody. It's very ambiguous with the blog talk to see who's actually there. Because I'm expecting Gilbert to call in on Skype. And he's not popping up for some reason. All right, I'm going to keep moving forward. No clue. Hold on a second. I'm sorry, everybody. This is confusing. All right, let's experiment here. Let's see if we get some random guy to talk to. Hello. There we go.
Do you hear me?
I can hear you now, Gilbert. How are you? Sorry, for some reason you didn't show up on the queue. Can you hear me?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Good to hear from you.
I can hear you, but there's a slight lag.
What's that? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. I have to ice mine down 1 hour before the show, and I'm on a mobile phone modem connection, so that might be my fault.
Yeah, you're a little dim. I think Skype tends to be a little unstable, I've found, but hopefully talk kind of loudly, I think we'll be fine. Very good. You there?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm here.
Good. So, I mentioned the complications with the New York Zeitgeist Day. We're going to leave that on hold for right now. Obviously, something's going to happen. I'm working on different venues, but Zeitgeist Day is now going to be a huge focus for all of us coming the new year, and we have a lot of information that's going to be coming out for everyone. So, Gilbert, if you want to just jump into anything that you want to talk about regarding Zeitgeist Day, or maybe run down what you wanted to talk about in general, I can open the floor to you.
Thank you. Am I still here? Since I noticed this lag is still ongoing.
What's that? I'm sorry?
I said, do you still hear me fine? Because I noticed that it's not working.
You're a little low, but you're coming through. So let's just keep going and maybe speak up a little bit.
All right, that's fine. Okay, I'll just go ahead and start then. The first thing I wanted to point out, also, I suppose you did an announcement on a media project, but while that's not up yet, and there are artists within the movement that want to get active, actually we have a Divine Art page that's being maintained by Apollo, a moderator in the movement, and there's a lot of great stuff already going on in there.
Right.
So if you go to the Zeitgeist Movement DeviantArt page, you can also chip in and help already with designs. Just wanted to show that out. Okay. Well, since it's the last show of the year, I'm going to start with an official announcement, and that is the following. I don't have the data very accurately at this point in time. I will have it for next show or next time that I might come on. We are approximately 200 chapters worldwide right now, and I think that's very great.
Yes.
And these obviously aren't just the international chapters, also ranging from state to city chapters, but I think we've grown quite a lot, and just want to throw that out there. If you're ever talking about the movement, that's approximately the number of chapters that we have right now, and obviously it will only continue to grow next year. So I'm pretty happy about it, and I hope we keep going on the same pace.
Yes, absolutely. I think.
Furthermore,
go ahead.
Yes.
Okay.
Furthermore, I wanted to talk about the chapter website. Recently, we've had some issues with content on chapter websites. While that is handled and there's no conflict that's still out there, I wanted to go in depth as to why there is certain content that can be on chapter website and why there is certain content that cannot be on chapter websites. In specific, this would be relating to projects that go against the current direction of the movement. For example, there has been chapters who have started projects that want to build cities at this point in time with the current value system in place. Now, obviously, we have a consensus within the movement that would not be a good idea to start with. And I think it is very important to point out that if you are accepting to become a chapter, you are still allowed to do what you want, but also you're agreeing to be a satellite of the global movement. And at that point in time, if you do post content like that on your website as a Zeitgeist Movement project or a related project, it will reflect badly on the community at large, because we as a movement do want to start with the building of cities, but not at this phase of the transition or of the activism that we're doing, since we're still so busy with changing the values. And at that point in time, if such a complication arises, there will be a chance that we contact you and ask you to separate that content from the actual chapter representation. So it's not something that we don't want you to put such content on your website. It's just to protect our image and to make sure that the direction we're headed is being followed through by all chapters. I just wanted to reflect on that a little. Do you want to add on that, Peter?
I would say it's very important that we keep things in line with what we're doing. There really are not that many other organizations out there that see what we are doing, really. There are lots of wonderful green movement organizations that I'm very impressed with, people that are, they're an advocation of communities and sustainable living. All of them have certain places, if you will, but I'm with you and hesitant to make it seem like we are an absolute promotion of these detached groups. And obviously there are some groups that we should not even be remotely promoting at all. Any kind of radical monetary reform group, I'm not interested in monetary reform, except in the sense of such a radical reform that none of these people would talk about. I don't care about people talking about ending the Federal Reserve anymore, because it's not going to do anything. So I agree with you, and I won't belabor it, but anyone out there that has a chapter that has as another organization that they've found that they feel will represent a little bit or a sub-aspect of what we talk about, use your judgment and let Gilbert, myself, or Jen Wilding know if you're a domestic U.S. state chapter, and ask what we think of it, because we want to be careful not to misguide people. A lot of people have already been using our name and the Venus Project's name for misguided purposes, taking donations. There's a lot of stuff like that happening, so we do have to be careful. We're not trying to limit information. We're not censoring anything. We do want to keep things in line so people understand very, very clearly what we're doing. And based as you've listened, Gilbert, I still get tons of emails every week and questions about people that assume we are building some kind of commune city. So obviously, this information isn't permeating, at least the new members, obviously. So, anyone that's an advocation of sustainable living, that's very different from advocation of trying to build some place where everyone can go and hide from the collapsing world. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. But thank you.
That's fine. Thanks for adding on that. Yeah, I can imagine all the emails you get with people getting that idea, and that's the only reason why I brought this specific issue up. I mean, I know that the chapters that have these projects ongoing are really, they're well-intentioned, and we're definitely not saying this is some evil that we want to ban from the website. No, it's not that. It's just image protection to make sure that the message that we are carrying out right now and that the direction is very, very clear, and that's the only reason. But for the people that have been contacted in the last few hours, I just want to say I think that for the rest, everybody is doing a very good job, and please don't let that disturb you. It's just keeping things consistent within the whole movement. So I guess that concludes that topic.
Good.
Also, what I wanted to talk about, since I haven't had a chance on the radio show, is besides C-Day 2010, which we can go into in a minute, we're working on a chapters project called World Hunger Can Be Solved. The topic for that is up on the forum as well within the chapter section. And anybody that is interested after I explain it can please come help and contribute. The basic outline and idea of the project is to hold a promotional campaign with all the chapters around the world. This will consist of flyering, handing out packages, and basically focusing the attention of the population or the target audience on the fact that the current monetary solutions being proposed to end world hunger are, not the best way to go, to put in a very subtle way, but that rather the use of the correct technology would be a much more sane solution. And the project is certainly not an attempt to end world hunger, although of course that would be a nice outcome. It's purely a Zeitgeist Movement promotional campaign, making sure people know that there are people around here working in a direction that can support such a change in the system, technologically providing people with the right amount of resources instead of doing it on a monetary basis, trying to buy food for countries while the whole system that is in place will not support them in the long run. So it's just Band-Aid, and we want to make sure that within this project we get the attention of as much people as possible, that there are other ways to go, and that this is one of them, and that they can contribute by joining us in the movement. I just wanted to clarify on that. Sorry, that sounded a bit vague.
No, I think it not only is a promotional issue, it could actually be very, very profound, because there are certain things that I've talked about in the past and Jacques have talked about which could, in fact, alleviate world hunger tremendously, especially in the transition, if there was an approach that exceeded, if the approach was serious, such as creating not programs that involve money, which send soup to starving people in Africa, but actually devising actual, factories that can extrude vitamin-rich food, and a lot of the more efficient ways of getting nutrients to people and water to people, and the building of hydroponic desalinization plants on the coast of certain regions that are losing fresh water. This could be actually a very profound program if it moves forward and we get enough interest as a subsect, because there really is the possibility of solving this, but it can't be done in a monetary system. That's the problem. But no, I think it's a very admirable and respectable concept, both as a promotion, and it could take on a life of its own too, applying science and advanced ways to solve the hunger and water scarcity issue as opposed to the nonsense we're seeing today. So thank you.
Definitely, yes. I mean, it's just we will see how it grows and how it's going to work out. Obviously, the concept initially is for the promotional part of it, but hey, we never know what kind of audience we can attract with it, and perhaps we can continue and start collecting scientific data or proposals, concepts for new technology or existing technology and how we can utilize it to end hunger. So yeah, I think it will be a very interesting project for next year. And having said that, I think that 2010 will be a very active year for the movement. We obviously have Z-Day 2010 coming up, and I'm pretty sure that there will only be an increase of projects running. So for anybody that thought that 2009 was kind of quiet, well, let's say 2010 is going to be booming. That's a promise. So I hope everybody will be very happy to participate as well. We're going to do a lot. On that note, you have put up a website for Z-Day 2010. Can you tell a little more about that? What is the concept behind it?
Sure. Basically, it's going to be pretty much an automated site, which is going to make it very easy for people to register, create an account for their event. They can submit their event through a simple form. The form will translate that into an event page. It will automatically orient it into a Google map where everyone can see all the events worldwide, coupled with contact information and supporting documents, any third-party website, of course. So it's going to be what we did last year was more haphazard. We actually had to go through and do it all manually. This is going to be a very great website for people to update their events. The only thing that we're going to do as administrators is to approve them to make sure they're not false events. As I mentioned last week, we had a lot of people posting false events just to mess people up in regions. And I had all these people email me that they went to some random place and there was no event happening because it was a false event. We have to, of course, not let that happen again this year. So that site's going to have all the information for Z-Day contained in one place, including supporting information like the toolkit, which will have the document that we are working on together regarding how to go about the event. It will have links to any torrents that have packages for people to download. Obviously, everything for free. I'm trying right now to get as much media as possible, both Jacques Fresco's lectures and movies and just anything and everything that I've done, and of course anything that anybody else has too. I'm going to try and get a small campaign soon for pamphlets, and I was really hoping the Zeitgeist Media Project would be done by now because I was hoping to extract some material to be a part of this particular campaign. This big package, in other words, that I want to create so people have a lot to work with posters and everything, tips, radio station lists. I want people to do general activism, to call into any and all radio stations during these days or single day. There's lots of things that... Whoop, he's still there? I got a little buzz there. Distortion. Gilbert? Hey, Gilbert, you still there? I think I might have lost you.
No, I'm still here, but
okay,
you talked about the buzz, so I thought you were fixing that. No, I'm definitely still here, so yeah, I'm pretty...
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry?
Go ahead, I'm sorry, we have a bad connection.
Well, yeah, it sounds very... We do, sorry, that's my fault because I'm on the phone modem. Anyway, I'll continue.
Okay.
So we have the Z-Day 2010 website. Obviously, we have the Z-Day team as well this year. That's composed of individuals from the chapters who will be able to do this administrative task that you talked about earlier, such as listing all the events, checking with the organizers to see if actually an event is happening, so that people don't show up for nothing. That would be really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
And obviously to deal with all the emails that will be coming in of events being set up, questions. I mean, it's really important that we have more than one individual working on that because, I mean, the movement has grown quite a lot. And if everything goes well and the promotion go well as well, I think it will exceed last year. Obviously, that's just an assumption. It's hoping that it will be. since we had the movie momentum as well last year. But who knows? I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely, when you have the venue, I will definitely be coming to New York, and then I think it will be a very good and successful event if that works out with the venue. Certainly the symposium plans that you showed me, I mean, if that is going through, that is quite it's quite a nice concept. So I hope you get it done with the with the venue.
Sure, we'll see what happens. I'm one way or another. It's going to be either a full day or a multi-day event. It has gotten complicated. I'm not going to go into details on that, but nevertheless, it's going to be interesting. But it's not just about the New York event. It's also about having quality events worldwide. And I'm going to try and combine them all together. For example, back to that website, we're probably going to make a page for webcasts. As we all know, there's a free Ustream. There's a company called Ustream which has free webcasts for people that simply want to do them. And we'll try to have a page where everyone can webcast their event, and we'll have them all embedded on one page. So the press and media, they can come to this site and they can see the magnitude, the connectivity of all of the organizations in one place. And I have other ideas for making this connectivity as well in a live setting for the actual New York event. But I'm going to have to stop there because it's just not set up yet. But I have a feeling the quality of this day is going to be unlike anything before, because last year there really wasn't a movement yet. We had a very loose movement. The organizations had very little media. There was some information that was put out that I put out immediately after the film was created, the orientation video. But we have a lot more out there now. We have a lot more active people. We have tons of chapters. And I'm with you. I'm really interested to see what happens, frankly. And it comes down to everyone listening and everyone that wants to participate. It's not a matter of the New York event. It's a matter of everyone putting in as much energy as possible to really get their area engaged. So I could just kind of leave it at that.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, I mean, it's very much dependent on everybody's participation. Also in that regard, I know that there are plans in the works to make some standard media letters to aid everybody as well, to engage the local media, and also some very good tips that we'll be including in the guide on how to engage your local communities, basically to get a good enough crowd together to have a quality Z-Day event. Obviously, a quality Z-Day event is not only the biggest events that are going on with the most information. A quality event can also be a small, concentrated event with say, 50 people. The main and most important thing, I think, that will be very important on Z-Day itself is the output of information and how you bring it to people. Of course, it would be the nicest if you get a lot of people who are not engaged in these kind of topics yet, and bring the information to them on the day itself in your own and unique creative way. And the quality is going to be very dependent on the output of that information. So if you are doing a lecture, perhaps it's not the best idea to do one of Peter's lectures, although I think your lectures are great, Peter, but I think that it's much more important for people to actually try to comprehend the information and put together a lecture themselves, if you know where I'm headed with that argument.
Yes, absolutely. Everyone needs to absorb the information and make it their own based on their region. And that's how you make it personal to the people you're speaking with. I completely agree. So we have a few minutes left, Gilbert. One thing I thought was great that we talked about yesterday was this newsletter concept, and I wanted to throw that out there for people to digest. We're trying to create at this stage will be a monthly newsletter for the movement, which will happen in a PDF form. We evidently have a small team working on this idea in its primitive stage, and who knows, in time maybe we can have people that are in the movement submit articles themselves that they think are relevant, and we can basically have kind of an open newsletter with the community. And anyone who sends us relevant articles or descriptions of modern events, new technology, the collapse of the system, there's lots of information that would relate to what's happening today. Science and technology, obviously. This would be a great thing for people to start relaying some information to us. So I don't want to go on too long with that because it's still in its primitive stage, but this newsletter I think will be very effective. So I'm looking forward to that, Gilbert. That should be good. That'll keep people abreast, and we'll have more content to mail out, and maybe eventually we'll become sort of a physical form. It'll also give things for people to give out to people. We can create a great database of articles. We can get Jacques to write articles for us, apart from the general community. So I think that's a great idea, don't you?
Yes, I certainly do. There's a lot that we can do with this newsletter, and obviously this will be one of the main things to keep everybody as informed as possible. I know from a lot of the local chapters or international chapters that actually a lot of the community isn't browsing the forum that regularly, so anything that we post there as news might go unnoticed by a large part of our community. So I think it's very important to get this idea into a concrete form within a reasonable time frame. I think there's very much potential and very much opportunity to inform everybody as well as possible. So yes, I think it's a great project.
Yes, I think that'd be great. And I think in time we're just going to keep expanding different means of communication. And again, I want to remind everyone before we end this that we've only been around less than a year, and we've done tremendous progress in this time. So I want everyone to re-energize themselves for the new year, because I think we're simply going to be upping the ante. And by the time my new film comes out, I think it's going to be hopefully it will be a point of great interest, because as the basis of the film has been working, the basis of the movement has been working, I'm designing my film, which again will be released for free, to encapsulate virtually everything that we talk about. So almost like it's a definitive representation of exactly what we're trying to do in a no-holds-barred manner. Different, but also in an aesthetic way. So I'm hoping by the time that film comes out, and I'm going to be promoting like crazy, as basic, because as you know, the addendum was a trigger. I'm hoping this film will create even more momentum, and we'll just see what happens. I'm really hoping that the film will bring us to a new level, because that's really what happened with the prior film. And again, the Zeitgeist Media Project, I can't wait to see that. I want to see everyone else come together. I even have some things that I'm going to announce that I would like people to contribute to my film through the Media Project as we move forward. I think I've briefly talked about some of those things in the past. But anyway, I'll stop rambling. Gilbert, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it. And I'll have you back on very soon. Is there anything else you want to say in the moment we have left?
Yeah, I just wanted to apologize to the public because obviously everybody could notice that
Well, you dropped out. You there? That was an ominous ending. Gilbert, you still there? Okay, I don't know what happened to him. He looks like he dropped out. Actually, I lost him altogether. But I guess we'll leave it at that. I guess we'll have him back on to finish his sentence, because I have no idea what he was going to apologize for. But anyway, everybody, I really appreciate everybody listening again, and I'll be back next week. Hope everyone has a happy New Year. And let's just keep plugging away. And I, again, really appreciate all the work that's been happening. I hope everyone appreciates each other for the reciprocation and just what's been going on collectively. And, of course, dealing with the general abuses as we have been. I think everyone's been very vigilant in maintaining the integrity. So thank you very much. Have a great New Year, and I'll talk to everyone very, very soon.